Hey guys, it is Rachel and it's Thursday, and today we are closing the rota that Jen put together for us, and we are going to bring it all together really and look at recovering as a whole and not just seeing it as something, seeing it as something where you just recover from your eating disorder. We've touched on various issues over the past few weeks. We've been looking at behaviours that maybe diagnoses that maybe run alongside your eating disorder and sort of what things could be masking it. So what can happen for people, as I mentioned the other week, is that you can come through your eating disorder and find that issues such as obsessive behaviours, self-injury, even depression are not as prominent or actually fade away. That can be the case for some people, that you wouldn't necessarily say that somebody with anorexia also has obsessive compulsive disorder. What you may say is that they are exhibiting signs of obsessive behaviour, and it doesn't mean that it's a separate diagnosis. And so only when you maybe come through that is it going to be easier to be aware of whether there is another predisposed difficulty there. And what I've got to say with regards to making a full recovery is that it is essential that you deal with all of the reasons or all of the issues as to why you developed the eating disorder in the first place. I didn't do trauma counselling until 2005, end of 2005. I was having really severe flashbacks, and I'd begun my recovery from my eating disorder at the beginning of 2004. So by the end of 2005, the most prominent difficulty that was there for me was a very dark depression and still some very obsessive thoughts and feelings. And also I was medically quite unwell for numerous reasons. I had a lot of surgeries and things, and it transpired that what was going to be needed would be the trauma work, and to do that work with somebody who I trusted. And so stubborn Rachel refused to just have a psychiatrist and a separate therapist. I insisted on the same psychotherapist who was my therapist, and for many years that worked. And so I was put in hospital at the end of 2005, and that served as like a review, that served as like a time to sort of deal with the hallucinations and the suicidal ideation and monitor where I was at really. And the trauma work was hard. I had somebody who was incredibly strict about how it was carried out, and if the thoughts of behaviour, all those things came along. I'm sorry, have we just seen my hair? Can we just? And if things started to resurface, the therapy, the trauma therapy, would slow itself down. So dealing with that trauma, dealing with the abuse, was crucial in me being able to make a full recovery as I have today. And for me, the connection with my eating disorder and the abuse was pretty tight, to be honest. My initial weight loss was to do with escaping the body that had been hurt, escaping the body that had been attacked, escaping the body that had been abused by somebody. And I believed, I'd convinced myself that by shrinking myself and by making myself smaller, by not having flesh, by not having something to grab, that I was less likely to be not only attacked again but objectified, and it drew attention away from me in terms of male attention and that type of thing. And I was very, very uncomfortable with those things anyway, and always have been ever since I was younger. I mean, it's just something I don't like at all. And that isn't to judge people who do, or people who kind of thrive on that. I mean, that's a individual thing, but it's something I've always felt very uncomfortable with. And the lock between my developed woman self and wanting to not even become childlike, but I wanted to just shrink. I just didn't want to be noticed. And so in dealing with the trauma, it took until probably the end of 2010 to really get beneath what went on. And it was hard, probably close to one of the hardest things I've ever done. Harder probably than putting food in my mouth and keeping it down and gaining weight and recovering from that. I knew that if I was to have a sustained recovery from an eating disorder, I had to get below what was needed. I had to peel those layers back, and that's exactly what I did. And I guess you could say it was a courageous thing to do, and I did relapse in 2007 with my eating disorder, quite severely actually. And so that put a halt to some of the work until I was willing to sort of build back up on that. And I don't even know whether it was dealing with the abuse that triggered the relapse. I think it was maybe just part of the process. Maybe, you know, when we do recover or in recovery, we do have our moments. You know, it didn't last too long, but it was quite severe. It happened in quite a small space of time and quite severely, which is kind of like a running theme with, you know, the difficulties I have anyway. Start very slowly and then suddenly and bam, you know, it's being dealt with. And once I got beneath that, I felt incredibly liberated. I remember the sense of freedom, of not dealing with those flashbacks, of not feeling haunted by that, resolving my issues with relationships. And yes, that's an ongoing process. Nobody's perfect in a relationship. I'm certainly not. It has left me quite wary, and my trust issues are kind of there, but kind of then when I fall in love, it kind of all goes away and I just risk everything for somebody. But it was essential that I did that work. And maybe at times whilst coping with that, I used obsessive behaviours more. I used to clean an awful lot and those types of things. But what I found that's happened over the years, especially now I've come out of therapy, because I do think you can stay in therapy for too long. I do. I think there is such a thing as overanalysis, and there is only so much you can sit and talk about. And sometimes you just need to live your life, and that isn't me being in denial. I can only get on with my life and live my life as long as I'm not using behaviours, as long as I'm not a danger to myself or others. So the day-to-day life that I live now, I do my best to get on with. I don't think it would be productive for me to be sitting in therapy saying this is hurting me, this is hurting me, because sometimes part of the growth is learning to manage it on your own without behaviours. So that's kind of the recovery in itself. It's about having some really shit things going on, or your mood just dropping for no apparent reason, and rather than using behaviours or managing it by using behaviours or expressing yourself using behaviours, that you just get on with it, that you do things that, you know, are normal. You talk to your friends, you talk to your family, you express yourself in writing or through having a rant or listening to music or getting lost in a film or something. And as broken-hearted as I was when my therapy came to a very abrupt end, I think it did everything for me in terms of my recovery. It showed me that I could cope on my own, and it showed me that as much as I might be dependent on a psychiatrist because of my medication and him understanding that, I could live without therapy, and that was massive. And actually 2011 was an amazing year, and I'm not saying every year since then's been perfect, but I cope on my own now. And what I often say to people is that I have self-harmed in that time, and I'm not making excuses or allowances for it. It happens in a moment of time. It's something that happens as a one-off. It isn't something that is ongoing and destructive and making me ill. It happens, and rather than having somebody there with me to keep me safe, I go through that process and I realise I've self-harmed, and I open up to somebody and I take the measures myself. But one time I couldn't do that. I had to accept help, and that's what you've got to do. If you know, there's nothing wrong in asking for help. There's nothing wrong in saying, me and my mum used to have my medication for I don't know how long, and that's something that was done even when I wasn't using behaviours and stuff, but if those thoughts were around to do with suicide, that they were taken from me. And now I'm at a point again whereby I manage those things myself. I don't have to tell everybody everything, and there are things that I mess up with. And I mean, I haven't done anything since was it October? I can't remember when it was, maybe October. And I tried to self-harm and stuff, and then I was kind of like, what? And I turned to a friend, and then I kind of moved on from it. And that's going to happen, and it doesn't have to mean things are getting worse, but you've also not got to allow yourself to be in denial, because if that is something that's going on for a long, long time and you choose to ignore it, things are only going to get worse. And that did kind of happen to me last year, and I went kind of really manic, and I just pushed everything to the side. I stopped, I neglected myself. I stopped looking after myself, and I let things run out of control, including my medication. I'm still paying the price for that now, as I build myself back up. So that's me. You know, you need to get to the root of what's going on, and whatever that takes, whether that's, you know, meditation, holistic therapies as well. You know, just try and engage yourself in a wide range of things, and don't close your mind to things. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it's not your, you know, cup of tea, as it were, then that's fine. But be persistent in some things, and allow yourself to see some of the results, and you know, don't give in as easily. You know, if you can come this far, then you know you can try out different ways of coping and healthier ways of coping, and just see. All right guys, I'm gonna go, and I will see you again next week. Okay, bye.